Assalamu alaikum. You're watching Views and News, and I'm Faisal Rehman from our Islamabad studios. Today, we'll be talking about the Modi's anti-Muslim agenda in India. As we all know, that more than 40 houses were burnt in India's Rajasthan area, and we do talk about the issues in Karnataka, in Delhi, in the extreme eastern area of India, like Assam for that matter. We do talk about the Kashmir issue. But now one thing is for sure, this anti-Muslim agenda is prevailing all over, in each and every part of India. And nobody else is responsible other than Mr. Modi, along with his few very close allies. The Home Minister, the Defense Minister, the National Security Advisor, or the Foreign Minister. Now, or as they call it, the External Affairs Minister. The interesting part is that this has started way back, and it has gained momentum over a period of time, especially after the act by the Indian authorities 2.5 years ago, when they abrogated the Article 370. And we all got to know what happened after that. Forget about Kashmir for the moment. Let's talk about the rest of the 220 Muslims living in India in miserable conditions. Their houses are torched, their businesses, they are set on fire, their kids can't go to school or colleges, girls can't even cover their face or take hijab for that matter. People can't offer their Friday prayers because they are told that you should not even exceed this certain line. This is what India is all about. So-called the largest democracy, so-called the most secular state. This is an extremist state, and extremism is being sponsored all over the world by India. So before I introduce you to our panelists, our production team has prepared a report. Let's watch that first.
Minorities of India living in the Hindutva-oriented fascist Modi's regime are suffering from the dire community and personal insecurities. The followers of BJP RSS ideology are becoming more and more overt and ruthless in perpetrating violence against Muslims. The latest string of violent actions and merciless vandalism against Muslims was seen in the Karoli area of Indian state of Rajasthan, where radical Hindu zealots burnt over 40 houses of Muslim community. Pakistan Foreign Office, through a statement, has strongly condemned this senseless vandalization and said that Hindu extremists belonging to BJP RSS with connivance of local security authorities were involved in the incident. The statement added that such traumatic events are reflecting the current regime's deep-seated animosity against the Muslims in India. The Foreign Office called upon international community to take an immediate notice of the worrying level of Islamophobia in India. Moreover, the statement urged the international actors to take the notice of the deafening silence of BJP leadership and absence of discernible action against the perpetrators of such extremist acts.
Now, let me introduce you to the panelists, and they'll be talking about this very important issue. We have with us Brigadier Retired Tipu Sultan Sahab, who's a senior analyst. Sir, thank you very much for your time. And on Skype, we have with us Dr. Talat Shabbir Sahab, Director CPSC, ISSI. And we also have with us Altaf Hussain Wani Sahab, who's the Chairman of KIIR. Thank you very much, gentlemen, for taking your time out and being a part of our program. Now, Brigadier Sahab, let's talk about this latest story where more than 40 houses were burned in India's state of Rajasthan. And interestingly, sir, in the recent elections, if you look at a couple of those, not couple, rather 5 or 6 of those major states, except for one, and that was Punjab, BJP won the elections. Now, talking about Rajasthan, sir, this extremism element, which never used to be a part of that area, perhaps, it has started ruining Rajasthan, sir. 40 houses were burned. I mean, this is the kind of level they have achieved now, that they wouldn't shy away from anything, by the way.
Well, the Indian government is quite, because the BJP has been able to collect the Hindu vote together, and in their perception that is sufficient, and they can do anything with the rest of the minorities in India. And intrinsically, the Hindus have always been against the Muslims. Even great leaders, those who chose to be in India, like Abdul Kalam Azad and Shibli Nomani and everybody, they are known to have said that one thing you cannot take out of the Indian Hindu psyche is their hatred towards Muslims. And even Qaeda-Azam, when he switched over from the Congress party to Muslim League, he is known to have said that. I think in this modern era, the Indians continue to kill Muslims, to burn churches, to burn mosques, and burn houses, and burn
Set on fire the
burn
businesses,
people
you name
like
it,
this.
and they do it.
This fellow, who is the Indian Prime Minister, is known to have killed hundreds and thousands of people when he was Chief Minister of Gujarat, and he was denied access to the Western countries. There are videos where he is killing the Muslims and enjoying and commenting on that. This is something very unfortunate. But having said that, I will tell you that it is about time that the Indian Muslims organize themselves for defense. I am Faisal, reminded of the last Berber king of Hispania, Spain, when he was defeated and handed over Cordoba and the coat of lions at Alhambra. And on top of the hill, he looked back to his palaces and the sprawling areas, which was taken by Isabella and Ferdinand, and he wept. And his mother said, if you could not fight for your kingdom like a man, why are you weeping like a woman? So therefore, I want to tell you is that we can sit on the televisions and we can talk about the atrocities by the BJP, and we time and again refer to the European Union, to the demarches, to the dossiers that Pakistan has been given to the United Nations, to other organizations, and speaking in the OIC, and speaking in the Arab League, in Central Asia and whatnot. But I think there has been no effect to that, because the West wants to look this. Today when I was coming for your program, the entire Western media was talking about atrocities in Ukraine and Bacha. And I was thinking that the American soldiers have an immunity from the International Criminal Court. They did that when they attacked Iraq, and the American atrocities when they killed 80 madrasa young
I remember they
children.
bombed.
They used daisy cutters in Afghanistan. They bombed marriage parties. They bombed funerals. Where are those criminals? Where are those criminals of
the dual standards?
Modi?
I mean, this is the
Where are
most
those criminals
unfortunate part.
of the BJP, which are following the Nazism?
And if you remember, sir, what happened in 2020 all over India, and in particular
all
in
over
Delhi,
India, and the Indians,
the Muslims were targeted by design.
by design.
And those families who've been living together for the last 30, 40 odd years, sir.
It is heartbreaking.
They were
I'm
beggars
telling you,
from-
it is heartbreaking to know what is happening to the Indian Muslims. And it is more worrisome when the Indian Muslims cannot defend themselves. 220 million people are being persecuted by 1 billion Hindus. And the Christians are quiet and the Sikhs are quiet.
So they are the next target.
So, I think where India is going, nobody can save India now.
Self-destruction mode, as they call it, sir?
You can keep quiet for some time, but you cannot keep quiet and get away all the time. As Ali said that the atrocities cannot endure, and a non-Muslim state can exist, but zulm cannot endure. So what I want to tell you is that the international community is quiet, and they are not paying any heed to it. Within the Indian constitution and within the Indian democracy right now, the Muslims have no way, the Kashmiris have no way. This will keep on happening. Rajasthan, which is a sprawling state, traditional, the Mughal emperors have known to have had places over there, and Fatehpur Sikri, route to Rajasthan, all that.
Look at the culture of that state.
Look at the
Amazing.
culture, and it coincides with the culture of Sindh. You know, Sindh was divided.
This area borders Pakistan.
The borders Pakistan, and you know, it is next to Hyderabad and Junagadh, which is supposed to have come
Been
to
part
us.
of Pakistan,
So
yes.
was Firozpur, so was Gurdaspur, so was Kashmir.
Muslim majority
The
area.
Muslim majority areas. So the world is quiet. I think the Indians are further taking advantage of the situation in Ukraine, the confusion in there, and their mercantile ability in the world to hide their crimes. But I think these crimes against humanity at such a massive scale are going to have catastrophic results for the Indians.
So let me also include now Dr. Talat Shabbir Sahib is the director of CPSC, ISSI. Dr. Sahib, now this is what we used to hear about Kashmir, and now this is a regular feature whether you talk about Assam or Rajasthan or other states for that matter. So this means that this secularism, I mean this concept of being secular doesn't exist anymore in India. Extremism is the name of the game, and radicalization that has been spread over a period of time is really prevailing and taking over. Your take, sir? Can you hear me, Talat Shabbir Sahib? Or perhaps let me go to Wani Sahib if there is a technical problem. Wani Sahib, can you hear me, sir?
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm sure you must have heard the question, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, I want your response on that, sir, because initially, you know, we have had so many shows on the television when it comes to the Kashmir issue. But now, sir, this is spreading like a wildfire all over India. Your take?
You see, it's not for the first time in India we see the massacre of Muslims or their houses are burned or their properties are looted. It has happened in past too in most parts of the India. But from the 2014 onwards, when this BJP government took the power in India, we saw a rise in radicalization of Hinduism in India and a rise of sovereignization in India, and that too with on one hand their forces were already on the ground ready to counter the Muslims, and on the other hand they did some legislations and their leaders on each and every time did make such speech which incited hate and against Muslims. And this incident which took place yesterday in
Wani
Rajasthan
Sahib,
is in a way I see it
Wani
as
Sahib,
a preparation for the elections, the future elections, because Rajasthan has never been a BJP state, and we have
yeah.
seen this state is now in the eyes of the BJP. BJP has laid its stress on Rajasthan, and they have now started this campaign in Rajasthan in order to criminalize the Rajasthan in a way to get the vote the way they did in UP, the way they did in Uttarakhand, they did in many other states except for Punjab where they were not able to do it. But in other states they did. We see more recently in Assam, in other places, how the Muslims are in concentration camps and and what is happening in Karnataka. We have not, the Karnataka or the South at least was a place in India where there was not such apartheid towards Muslims. But during this regime has totally enacted such policies, and these all policies are condoned by the government. And what they are doing is it is not a criminal side thing between Muslims. It's with the government of India. It's not the Modi, but the whole organs of the government. It is the whole system of the government. And currently we see the Indian judiciary, Indian parliament, and as well as the Indian executive all are in hand in glove to suppress the minorities in India and especially the Muslims.
Wani Sahib, a quick comment, because you just spoke about Karnataka. We always assume that people living in the southern Indian side, down as I call it, the tail of India, they are more educated, very, I would say, humble people, soft-spoken people. How come this particular, extremism element has been transferred, I would, just like a virus, into that area? So, and what sort of problems can it generate in the future?
You see, that's what I said earlier. The people in South always were very friendly. They're educated people. But this BJP virus, this Hindutva virus has spread all over India. In a way, in order to capture power, BJP has done each and everything what they could do to criminalize the things, to make scapegoat one or the other people. You see the whole of the what we previously called uh, the communist bloc. That those have been suppressed in India. Likewise, all the other spaces, and they, in a way, unfortunately for the Muslims in India, some of the Muslims have become the part of this campaign. They pretend to be the Muslim leaders, but in a way, they are paving way for the success of BJP for their election win in most of the states in India by dividing the vote of Muslims and all that.
All right. Now, Talat, Shabbir Sahab, I hope you can hear me this time. Am I audible, sir? Talat Sahab? I think there's some technical problem, but Tipu Sahab, coming to you, sir. One impression that the Indians always give, whether they are in the university in the United States of America, I'm talking about the impression of the Indians in the Western world, that they are very soft-spoken. Even their stand-up comedians would come up with certain different kind of jokes. That particularly reflects them as if they are very naive, very humble, very down to earth, and their hands are always like this and they're like this, you know. This is the impression. But sir, there is a very interesting saying in
Bagal mein
Urdu.
churi, muh mein ram
Exactly, sir. Bagal mein churi, muh mein ram
Muh mein
ram.
ram ram.
The point is that whatever they show, this is not exactly who they are. So in this particular case, sir, I will not going to blame each and every Hindu, sir, because they are proper, decent people as well. But sir, this certain breed that has been financed, that has been approached by the senior leadership of BJP, and they've been told that, listen, do this. And then we hear that even in open gatherings, hate speeches are being delivered, and practically I heard one of the Hindu BJP leader saying that it's better to have an expensive gun than a mobile phone, because that gun will help you kill Muslims. And all I need is 100 people to eliminate the entire Muslim population. I mean, 100,000 people, sorry, to eliminate the entire Muslim population. Now, this is the mindset. Where are they going?
It is the same thing when you compare Ukraine. There are a lot of Jews over there. And what the world is saying about the Ukrainian refugees and about the Russian atrocities on them. And then the Israelis and the Palestinians. The Palestinians have got no arms. Their homes have been taken away by the Jews. They are being killed.
Hostile
They have been
takeover.
kicked out of their houses burned. They have been, the Israelis have been bombing them through modern weapons that the Americans give them. Nobody talks of that. Nobody talks of Kashmir. Nobody talks of atrocities against the Muslims.
Double standards, they're
So,
obvious.
this thing is going to exist. You cannot beat that. You cannot get BBC.
But sir, you need to have a counter narrative for that. That's all I'm saying.
I'm coming to that. We have submitted counter narrative. The channels like the Turkish channel, like sometimes the Far Eastern channels and Pakistani channels, of course, report that. But nothing heard effectively in the Western media, which is more prevalent, let's say, in the world. The Chinese media and the Russian media, they cannot come to that level as yet. So, what is going to make the difference? When you have a problem like this, you have to get up and you have to organize yourself against such a manner, such fascism. So, when you are arrayed, when you are prepared, when you pose a counter threat, when you pose a counter democratic system within yourself, when you pose a counter organization, and when you have a relentless campaign, you know, 20 million people in India can make a lot of difference. In Kashmir, they are making a difference and the Indians are not able to get hold of whatever they want to do in Kashmir after repealing Article 370 and 35 or so. So, what I am trying to tell you is that unless the population, you know, it's unfortunate, but I will give you the example. Have you ever seen an Afghan city having funeral comprising of lakhs of people? No, you will not. They just fight against injustice. They just fight against injustice. You have to get up and fight against the tyranny, against the zulm, against the atrocity, killing,
How long,
raping,
sir? How long?
arson.
How long?
How long can you go like that?
It's been
You will go to UNO, you will get nothing.
almost 1947 onwards. Just imagine how many years?
How many?
75? You're talking about
75 years.
3/4 of a century, sir.
75 years of, you know, pleading with the West, pleading with the humanitarian organizations, pleading with the United Nations for which it was meant. Which Muslim problem has United Nations solved? Palestinian? Kashmir? Well, they solved East Timor.
That was because of the Christians.
They were because of Christians.
Again, South Sudan because of Christians.
Again in Africa because of Christians. So
That's true. That's a reality.
they have killed lakhs of people in Middle East and in South Asia through their bombing. Nothing.
No war crime there.
No war crime
But
there.
over here they are blaming
Immunity
Putin.
there. So what I am trying to tell you is that we can have programs, hundreds and thousands of programs, will not make the difference. You know, when Osman was making the Ottoman Empire and he was beleaguered and he had less numbers as compared to the empire at Constantinople, and people asked him, how are you going to create a state? How are you going to create a state? He said, the victory lies in the heart, rest are all tools.
Absolutely.
And he got that. So 220 million people being killed, raped, their mosque being razed to ground, their houses burnt, and they are looking for democracy, the Indian democratic system and
So
constitution and UNO.
They are
It's not
confused.
going to-
They're not looking
they're
for
not going to
anything
get
now
that.
because perhaps the Muslims of the Indian occupied Jammu and Kashmir, they are looking towards Pakistan or other Muslim countries like Turkey, for instance. But sir, these indigenous Muslims who have been living there for centuries and centuries, I mean, these poor
There are,
people, they have been
I'm not talking of
stripped
terrorism.
away
There are
from all
ordinary
the-
people. There are ordinary people in Pakistan, urban or the other cities that they are living or rural areas. They want to go and fight in Kashmir. It is only that Pakistan is not facilitating that because of the policy. So this thing in subcontinent, in the subcontinent, it's not going to remain like this. I can assure you that unless the Indians mend their ways, there's going to be a flood of blood here in the subcontinent.
But-
and it is not terrorism,
but
it is not
let me-
extremism,
let me-
it is a making of Hindu fascism and their base, which they have based on Nazism and their hatred. They have known to have said that they want not a single Muslim in India.
very clearly.
They
have
very
not only said
clearly,
it once,
they
many times, on so many occasions,
have
in
taken
so
away
many
their
states.
citizenship.
Correct. Sir, now, sir, we have with us Talat Shabbir Saab. Talat Saab, I'm sure you must be listening to what we've been talking about. Now, my quick comment, which I expect from you, I mean, what is the design behind this? I mean, what is the ultimate move of the RSS? I understand that winning the election, but sir, currently if you look at their rise, it's everywhere. In Punjab because of the farmers' reason or perhaps for other complicated issues, the Aam Aadmi Party won and won, the majority there, just like Delhi. But sir, rest of those 5 states in which recently elections were held, I mean, it seems that the actual democratic and perhaps a very decent political party, which was supposed to be very secular, that was Congress, doesn't exist in India anymore. It has been eliminated. BJP is on a rise, and this is a reality. Let's accept it. But sir, why is that so? Is the anti-Muslim hatred that important, or anti-Muslim agenda, is that working so well out there? Talat, Shabbir sir.
Thank you, Faisal. I hope now you are hearing me.
Yeah, very clear. Please go ahead.
First of all, since I couldn't hear most of the conversations, I'll just make my comment on what has happened in Rajasthan, and then I'll briefly answer your question. It's just something. A little is told about what is happening in India when you come across such reports. For example, 40 properties were burnt in Rajasthan. And this is one of the series of incidences happening in India, other than Kashmir. For the deaf ears who do not want to listen to the exact state in Kashmir, I think we must remind those ears that we have now so far, this is March 2022 data, that we have more than 95,000 killings in Jammu and Kashmir. There are about 164,000 civilians arrested, and there were about more than 100,000 structures burnt, arson. So more than 11,000 women raped. So, the data which is available everywhere in the net, and many independent sources have also confirmed this data, is something which should be an eye-opening, right? Eye-opening fact. Modi government, they had a very populism-based agenda, populist drive when they were coming into power in the previous term also, and this term also, and their agenda was very, very clear to everyone in the entire world. They subjected their minorities to atrocities. They subjected their minorities to killings and humiliations, and the world community has seen. Now, just talking of Islamophobia that has actually grown in India, you can imagine the fascist Hindus. They are calling upon Hindus to, take up arms against Muslims and take up arms against the minorities. So that is what has India become. So it is no more Bharat. It is no more Bharat, a secular state. It is a Hindustan, which is actually focusing on the agenda of Hindutva, and they are focusing on Hindu ideals. And I think, by and large, when you see, there are some kind of resistance also. Those secular forces also talk about the secularism of India. But I think majority, the Modi's populism prevailed by and large, and he also, under the garb of that populism, he would manage such atrocities, and particularly subjected Muslims of India to those atrocities. Now, why the world community is quiet? Why is the world community, why the international human rights organizations are quiet on this? Why is United Nations and other international institutions are quiet about what is happening in India? Why are people letting India, Hindustan, to become very fascist in its approach towards minorities and particularly Muslims? So that was what our Prime Minister was actually harping upon most of the time when he was talking to international media, that look, Islamophobia, don't take this Islamophobia to a level where it becomes dangerous for the world to coexist, for communities to coexist in the world. So I think it's high time for world community to understand that you need to put some kind of end to what is happening in India, and you need to stop all what is happening.
Shabbir Saab, I have a question now, and this is pretty interesting because I've been thinking about it for some time. There are two different aspects. One, anti-Muslim narrative makes sense, because the Hindus have always believed in the caste system. Brahmins at the top, Shudras at the bottom, like Dalits as we call them. Or primarily making sure that Islamophobia prevails, because, sir, if you remember, post 9/11, they in fact just went along with the Western narrative of this war on terror against the forces which were in perhaps Saudi Arabia or in Afghanistan, the Al-Qaeda, war on terror. So they declared the indigenous Mujahideen of Kashmir as terrorists, and the Western world believed it because everybody was riding the same wave. Now, sir, recent phenomena is about Islamophobia, Brigadier Sahab, and they have chosen to ride another wave of Islamophobia because the entire world is talking about it. So these two put together come up with the narrative with the Hindutva or the RSS agenda is all about. Whether it is ending up in the, I would say, in hailing the Indian Prime Minister, Narendra Modi, or making sure that the anti-Muslim sentiment should multiply on daily basis. And the Indian polls and their results and the last couple of elections, they prove it. Shabbir Saab.
Was this question to me? Okay. Now, when we talk of rise of Islamophobia, we must understand that when we live in world community where I think Islamophobia rose because it was in the interest of most of the communities, those who are living in the world. For example, Western media and Western organizations have consistently been talking about Islamophobia and Islam as a threat, Islam as a political threat to various communities. So that's a very dangerous trend. So if you connect the dots that the world, the world as a whole was in fact trying to give rise to this concept of Islamophobia and Islam as a political threat to the world. Now, what we did, in Islamic world, so we are also, not partly, I think most of the time we were really not very active and aggressive in our approach towards addressing this issue. If you just see the proceedings of Organization of Islamic Cooperation the last couple of years, you would see that nobody tried to address this seriously. In fact, those countries who were trying to give rise to Islamophobia, they were actually projecting Islam as a threat to international politics or international governance or international communities. They had very close relations with those countries. For example, if you just take example of India, India has very good relations with many of the Muslim countries, and when you discuss, like I always say openly, that when OIC has to discuss about Kashmir dispute, they won't be very aggressive. They won't be very open. In fact, when we were in trouble with regards to Kashmir post August 2019, many of our Muslim countries had very close ties with it, and they displayed every kind of warmth with India. No, that's the kind of approach that we have towards resolving such issues. And if we expect Muslim Ummah to act jointly against Islamophobia, then I think OIC and Muslim Ummah has to work together and do something meaningful. Otherwise, it's just, most of the countries, I think Islamophobia is not on the priority list. So it was only Pakistan which talked about Islamophobia and got this 15 March as a day against Islamophobia. I think the rest of the Islamic world also should speak about what Islamophobia, why Islamophobia is, taking rise and why it's rising, and because it's not going to, it will in fact create problems with regard to coexistence in this world. So the world community should realize that if we have to coexist peacefully, we have to.
So that is an ideal situation. If the world community realized, trust me, they will not realize.
Never.
They have never realized. Why so much of wishful thinking, sir? Let me move to Wani Saab. Wani Saab, your comment. The question was perhaps that post 9/11, they rode the wave of the anti-terrorist move, and they blamed Pakistan, blamed the Kashmiri Mujahideen, and Pakistan was rated as one of the bad boys, though we were very close to United States of America as the non-NATO ally, but we all know what we went through, what happened to us and how we were dished. At the same time, sir, the second phenomena is about Islamophobia. not a very recent phenomena, but it's something which has been talked about now. 15th March is declared as a day regarding Islamophobia. So they are trying to capitalize on this front equally good, sir. Wani Saab?
You see, I think Dr.
As they say, give the devil his due.
The way the Muslim world has tackled this Islamophobia, it was unfortunate. It was only Pakistan which has been talking about it, talking around the globe on each and every platform, making OIC to realize about the impacts of this, how the West is using this, how the anti-Muslim forces are using against the Muslims. But unfortunately, most of the Muslim countries, as Dr. Sab said, had a very cordial relationship with the West as well as with the India. And most recently, we saw after 5th of August, when almost whole of Kashmir was caged and it was put under total communication blockade, the Indian Prime Minister was warmly welcomed in UAE and Kingdom of Saudi Arabia and given the highest rewards for that. So we should not, we should blame ourselves. What is happening with the Muslims around the globe, and though the human rights organizations and others do talk about it, but even the Muslim rulers do not talk about it. We can see the Western human rights organizations do talk about the cause of Islamophobia in the West, in the United States, or for that matter, the radicalization of Hindu nationalism in India. People do talk about it, but the people in the corridors, be that in West, be that in the United States, or be that in the Muslim world, do not talk about it. Because unfortunately, Muslims in their own domain have always talked about that if this Islam is rising and all that, they might have to give the democratic rights to their people and all that. They align in a way with the West and the fascist Modi's agenda. That's why we are facing such problems around the globe at present about the Muslims. And in India, it is clearly that everything, what the Indian government is doing, what they are planning, that is totally against the Muslims of India, that's against the minorities of India. They are each and every minority. It's not Muslims are the first prime targets of the Indian government, radicalized Hindus, but Christianity is always a target here. So I think the sand voices around the globe are talking about it, but the power corridors don't talk about it, because we know the current world is world of their own interests. As Brigadier Saab was telling us that when he came, he was listening that there was only talk about the Ukrainian crisis. That is the interest of the West. That is the interest of the United States. They talk about the Ukraine. They don't talk about the Kashmir. They don't talk about the other issues around the globe at present.
Now, sir,
so
I mean, let's, I would say, let's stop blaming the West now.
Absolutely.
Because this is our fault. Let's admit our fault, sir. If I'm slapping on my own face, I will not blame Brigadier Saab for that, sir. This is my own fault. You've been weak. You've been meager. You've been somebody who was never heard. And on top, the West is ruling the world. Made in Britain or made in USA is the assurance of quality. They have done it, they're ruling it. And it's a reality. So I would say, Brigadier Saab, now, it's not their fault. It's our fault.
Absolutely.
Because we say, oh, well, the West is not shown. Oh, the West has never shown.
We've never shown. Why would they? Barring a couple of leaders in the entire Muslim world, Turkey and Pakistan, the only person who is known to have made an effective some sort of impression.
And the West is after Imran and the West is after Khan.
Is Imran Khan, he said that Islamophobia.
And the next is Erdogan, you mark my words, sir. Remember there was this attempt of coup in Turkey a few years ago?
Of course, and now Biden is talking of removing Erdogan through opposition and doling out money to them also, like it they're doing here in Pakistan. So he's the only leader who made that difference. But I will tell you, I mean, the concept and the turn of the history, unfortunately, takes a long time to be in. Remember, Muslims were in disarray in 12th century, 13th century, and there were crusades, and the caliphate in Baghdad was not in order. The Muslims in Spain was not in order. There were Mongol hordes across Anatolia, across the Seljuk territory and all that. But lo and behold came Salahuddin and Nuruddin Zangi and all those Kurd lands, and single-handedly these phenomenal leaders made the difference. And when the Mongols came, or when they ransacked Baghdad and all that, and they went across the Sea of Galilee and Israel towards Egypt, and there were Mamluks who defeated them in the Battle of Ain Jalut out of nowhere, and then they defeat. So what I am trying to tell you is that we have seen after the World War, we have seen the Western powers making a fool of the Muslim world, dividing them, making lines,
this is their formula,
dividing them, and then plundering their resources, and then installing regimes of their own, like they removed Mossadegh in 53. There are regimes in Middle East that you know of. They are trying that in Central Asia. They are trying that in Pakistan. But I think slowly and gradually, surely people have started to realize their game. And when the public realizes that game, I'm very unhappy and sad to tell you that the Muslim world, the normal public realized it very, very late as to what their leaders were doing, what the West was doing to them, and some leaders who came up ever were either killed or changed. So now we have Imran Khan, and there is a case sub judice also. It is connected to that. It is absolutely connected to that.
This
and we got to realize that the narrative, that the international narrative that Imran Khan was trying to build against the atrocities in India, atrocities in Afghanistan that the West did, in Middle East and whatever, I think the West does not like that. They decided to remove him. But I think if the Muslim public, we are in numbers, if the Muslim public realizes that, and the type of governments in the Muslim countries
Sir,
change,
there is
then they
a
are
lot
going to
of
make a
division
difference.
within their own ranks, within their own thinking,
It's going to
sect-wise
take-
or otherwise. There are border issues, there are like issues regarding their approach. Some are pro,
But the public
West, some
sentiments,
are
Faisal, I will
anti-West.
tell you that the public sentiments across Africa, across the Arab world, even across India, for Imran Khan, have you heard other nations,
I do understand,
ordinary
sir.
people, the message is getting through. It is getting through. If it is today Imran Khan, tomorrow it will somebody else. It's going to take time. But I think if a number of Muslims in India realize that their safety is not presenting papers to the United Nations, trying to appease
Exactly.
the media, etc. It is their unity.
Because you have tried, you have tested, and you have failed.
It
Not
is-
once, twice, but on so many occasions.
It is
primarily.
they have to
Be collective, be united, have a counter narrative.
have big
And if one Hindu or a group of these people realizes, they come over, they start to, torture your family members or try to put your house on fire, you need to fight back.
When it gets to the determination and faith that the Afghans showed, when that sort of a faith and determination gets into the Indian Muslim's heart, then the story is going to be different.
Well, sir, as somebody said, sir, that when the going gets tough, the tough get going.
It is not long that is
And
it's going to
that
happen.
is what it seems like. But I guess, sir, there has to be a proper approach. They should not be left alone, because they are humans at the end of the day.
I will refer to
And
you.
forget about the Western world, sir. I think there has to be a different approach coming in from the Eastern world also, because
the
it's an
Eastern world,
Eastern
yes,
issue.
indeed.
The neighbors of Afghanistan, if they are so important in solving out the issue of the Afghan people,
we have tried
then
to
sir,
tell-
I think
we have tried-
Pakistan
we have
also
tried-
holds the
we
key.
have tried to tell
We
the
have
Arabs-
raised our
we-
voice against the Indian atrocities, whether in Karnataka or in Assam or in Indian occupied Jammu and Kashmir, or perhaps elsewhere. I think, sir, rest of the countries should follow also. Countries like Turkey, they always
In
support you this regard.
1857, they were largely the Muslims these Muslims were now dwelling in India, and they fought very bravely. And
It's in their bloodline.
It's not very long that it's going to come.
Well, let's see, the sooner the better for them. But sir, anyway, I'm running out of time, but I would like to say thank you very much, Brigadier Saab, for your presence, despite the fact that you're fasting, and the rest of our colleagues. Wani Saab, thank you very much for your time, and Shabbir Saab, thank you so much for your participation as well. And that's all we have for this Saab. I'll see you inshallah tomorrow. Till then, you take good care of yourself. Khuda Hafiz.